Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy M.K.S here, back in another video. I thought, as it's the Champions League, for those who follow football, I thought I'd do a video talking about, as a lover of Italian football as well as Celtic, I thought I'd talk about specifically Italian teams and whether they can once again do well in Europe as they did in the past. I was thinking like last season, um, three Italian teams reached the finals, so one in each. There were one in each. Um, there was one. There were one of them in each of the major European competitions. There are only four. There are only three European competitions, and in each of those finals, there was an Italian team. So Italian teams did quite well in getting to the final, but unfortunately, all three lost by really narrow margins, which was quite, dare I say, a gutting experience. I was rather gutted about that, if you like. Term I used to use in school, gutted, or whatever people used to use. But when they used to diss each other, and you used to say gutted afterwards. But so for anyone who doesn't like that term, please forgive me. If anyone out there doesn't like that term, I think the actual meaning of that term is a lot worse than people think. But anyway, I'm going to move on from that. But yeah, I just wanted to try and make a short video and ask and sort of ask what football fans, whether you think Italian teams can do well in Europe. I think it'd be interesting. Like, with a few good signings, I'd love to see. I'd love to see if Italian teams can actually win those trophies. I'd love to see all three European trophies being won by an Italian team, and preferably in the future, like even getting two teams into one single final, which for me personally would be a lot less nervy because I love all Italian teams equally. I have this strange thing. I love all the Italian teams equally. So for me, if there was like say the Conference League or Europa League or Champions League, either of those were featured two Italian teams, I'd be really happy because for me it would be much more relaxing because I wouldn't really mind which Italian team wins as long as it's an Italian team. I say I don't really care who wins as long as it's an Italian team. When it comes to Celtic, I want them to do better domestically, but I'd love to see in the next 5-10 years Celtic winning a European trophy as well, which is a bit of a dilemma for me because if I had to choose, I'd rather, in terms of Europe at least, I'd rather an Italian team win than Celtic, just slightly, even though I love Celtic as well. I suppose I love Italian teams a little bit more, but mainly I want Celtic to do well domestically. So anyway, getting back to the point about Italian teams, I'd love to see with a bit of investment. I suppose it's a bit too late for the first transfer window, but I'd love to see investors investing into Italian football. Just as I said on my Facebook and in previous videos, I'd love to see Italian teams being co-owned by all possible companies, corporations, businesses, whatever the difference is between those. Basically, anyone who invests, and I'd love for even places or areas to invest, like even cities, towns, villages, and whatnot, all around the world, to have their own investment vehicles, investment funds, or whatever, like sovereign wealth funds, which countries have. I'd love for cities, towns, and villages to have such all around the world, and as many of them as possible, basically, to invest in Italian football. Including obviously those in Italy itself, and so for Italian football to be lucrative, so I'd love for Italian football to work with FIFA and UEFA to look at how they can get that investment, maybe make some deals with FIFA especially, and also UEFA, but especially with FIFA, the governing body of football, to say, like for instance, if Italian teams donated 10% of whatever they made to charity, whatever revenue they had, then I think the more investment they had, even though it kind of gives a bit of an unfair advantage, perhaps, as I say, life's not fair, to Italian teams, just as English teams have had up to now, really much more unfair investment in their favour. So, as a fan of Italian football, I'd love for that for Italian football as well, Celtic. But I'd love for all Italian teams to be co-owned or by share and equity holders who have a small share each. Obviously, the more wealthy those companies or investors are, the more of a share or equity they would have in the club, or depending on how much share or equity they would want to buy from the clubs, respectively. So, for instance, a team like Cagliari, or Catania, or any other Italian team that begins with C, to be co-owned by the Chinese and even Canadian governments, and also say cities, towns, and places, villages, and whatnot that begin with C, and also Cascade Investments, Bologna to be co-owned by like Bloomberg, possibly Berkshire Hathaway and other companies, Bridgewater, BlackRock, and others that even Blackwater, what are they called, to invest in them. I think that'd be pretty interesting to see what they could achieve, and maybe even like the Rothschilds investment bank, Rockefeller's investment vehicles to invest in Roma together. I'd love for Roma to become like the Italian Galacticos, as I say, as I often say, and to have the best possible players, either them or Genoa. But I suppose it would have to be one or the other, perhaps, but to have the best possible players all put into one team, like the best possible goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and strikers, as I often say. A point I was going to raise on Facebook, I think, and I forgot, was I'd also love for Italian football to kick out violence somehow. I don't know how they do that, but I think, to be honest, I think they do have lots that they could learn from England or in the UK generally, in terms of like, especially England, the EPL and what they've done working with the police. I think or what the English police have done, especially, or in British police have done to kick racism out, or at least, violence out of the game, or at least take it away from stadiums. So unfortunately, a Newcastle fan was stabbed by an AC Milan hooligan. So I think that's such a shame on Italian football. It's not really going to help AC Milan or any Italian team to have more chance of winning, and it just makes Italian football look worse. And also, it could even result in bans or fines, which would adversely affect Italian football. I think instead, Italian football fans should be encouraged to invest in a local club and coach younger players. And again, I mentioned that point before, instead of hooliganism. And I would love to see like Newcastle and AC Milan fans like having a good time and enjoying themselves and each other's company rather than hooliganism. And I'd love to see AC Milan and other Italian teams win and beat teams like Newcastle, to be honest, just as much as anyone else. But I think football hooliganism obviously doesn't actually help to do that. And instead, I think those ultras, in this case AC Milan ultras, and also Inter Milan ultras, Roma ultras, and that sort of thing, instead could work on like coaching younger players and helping the club's image, instead welcoming fans of opposition teams in some way, and also donating to their club. So Roma fans, for instance, Roma ultras, donating to the club instead of having violence, or using violence, unless in self-defense. I can understand why they'd want to do that if rival fans from other cities, especially from other countries, come and try and cause trouble. Obviously, they're going to want to defend themselves. But I think obviously it brings a bad image to Italian football, and I think it would be cool to change some of those things. Some of the things I'd love to change about Italian football, as well as winning more trophies, most importantly, would be to take away the violence, take away corruption, anything to do with crime or criminality that's involved in football, and also look at what could be learned from the UK in terms of like taking football hooliganism away from Italian football stadiums and things like that, or even from Italian football generally, as much as possible. And also, I'd love to see Italian football become more attacking as well. So that's another thing I'd love to change. So I'd love to get rid of the hooliganism, and whilst having a good defence, develop a more attacking mindset, and fans to donate to the clubs rather than have like ultras or whatever. Ultras could perhaps do things like fundraise for the local club, encourage investment into the local club as well, invest their own money or donate their own money. It's an investment really, especially if they invest in the youth and things like that, as well as buying better players, because it's an investment in terms of like being happy when they win trophies, hopefully. And I think it'd be great to see Italians being happy winning trophies. So that's a sort of investment. So if they donate to the club, even, it's something they'll get back, something in return, which hopefully will be a good feeling. So donate to and strictly invest in the local clubs. I think that'd be cool if they did that. And again, looked at ways they could help to attract investment into Italian football. But more recently, in a more short-term vision, I'd love to see Italian teams winning a trophy this year, or maybe two, or if I'm really looking, three, and even the U.E.F.A Super Cup and even the World Club Cup. I'd love to see Italian teams finally win those again. I know we've won them in the past. But I'd love to see more being won more in the present and in the future. Yeah, I think that covers everything for now. I think I've waffled enough. There's probably other points I can cover. I'm going to wrap this up at approximately 10 minutes, and I'm out. Peace and love.